Hi, I'm Federico Engel.
Hi, I'm Glenda Flame.
We are partners at Butler Armstrong Architects in San Francisco.
And you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. Grab your Raisinets, it's movie time, and today we'll talk with several producers of architecture and design documentaries. They're all featured in Kyle Bergman's Architecture and Design Film Festival, which opened last fall and continues around the world. Filmmaker Allie Rood's Prickly Mountain captures Vermont's countercultural design-build movement. Beck Carpenter's Space Architect tells the story of NASA architect Constance Adams, whose pioneering designs for off-planet habitats inspire solutions for our own climate challenges. Danny Berish and Ryan Ma's Arthur Erickson Beauty Between the Lines traces the life and work of one of Canada's most celebrated architects. We'll wrap up with a musical guest, the JUNO award-winning Brandi Disterheft. And now your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hey, thanks, Tom. As the Architecture and Design Film Festival continues to circle the globe from its start in New York, so do the opportunities to see architecture documentaries in your town or on the device of your choice. I mean, we're all staring at screens way too much. So how about instead of watching 12 more cats do 15 more cute things, we all settle down for some popcorn and a design movie? Netflix has Abstract, the Art of Design, covering the creative process of designers from various fields, including an episode on Bjarke Ingels. Netflix also has The World's Most Extraordinary Homes, with Piers Taylor and Carolyn Quinton sharing unique architect design residences in challenging environments. Grand Designs on Netflix and Hulu is a long-running British series where Kevin MacLeod follows individuals who are building ambitious dream houses. And did you know there's a streaming service just for architecture and design? Shelter offers films and original series like Architecture on the Edge. I like all of these, plus for fun, I like to curl up with some sushi, some sake, and watch engineering catastrophes on HBO Max.
Oh, really?
Because sometimes what goes up does fall down. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by the Brent R. Harris Charitable Trust, restorer of several modernist houses, including Richard Neutra's Kaufman Desert House in Palm Springs, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Palm Springs, and Malibu.
Allie Rood is a filmmaker and creative director who combines her background in sculpture, design, and the outdoors with her love of architecture. Her debut documentary, Prickly Mountain, explores the countercultural design-build movement in Vermont, capturing the radical, handmade homes and experimental spirit that shaped her hometown. Drawing on her own experiences growing up among these inventive builders, Allie brings warmth and curiosity to the courage to build and live differently. From the Architecture and Design Film Festival, here's George's conversation with Allie Rood.
Allie, before we start talking about your film, what does it take to make a film? You have been working on this 9 years, 10 years?
Yeah, something like that.
And what possessed you? What middle of the night spasm happened to start all this?
I mean, you could say middle of the night spasm. I have a very clear memory of the stroke of inspiration. And that's true for probably almost every film project I've ever worked on. I was in New Zealand. I've been living in New Zealand for kind of off and on for the last 10 years. And early on, I'd moved from kind of a ski town. I'd been working on ski and action sports related video content, let's say advertisement mostly. And I was really wanting to sink my teeth into something a little bit more intellectually rigorous was kind of the term I used back then. I felt this calling to just set out and do something on my own with no real clear plan, which proved to be really, really troublesome moving forward. But I was sitting around the table in New Zealand, in Christchurch, and I just heard about the Rosine Architecture and Design Film Festival there. That was just this instant moment I realized, wait a second, there is definitely an audience for this film about Prickly Mountain and design build, which is kind of this really super personal story. It's a place I grew up in. My access to the community was really something special. And so, yeah, I kind of recognized it as this slow burn. I knew I didn't need a bunch of funding right off the get-go. To me, it kind of ticked the boxes of being able to kind of reconnect with where I grew up. I hadn't lived there in a long time, moved away at 18, but spent my whole life describing this place. And it made so much sense that, I couldn't believe there hadn't been a film made yet, and it made so much sense to make a film about this architecture movement just because, simply the houses themselves are something that needed to be documented. So, yeah, that's kind of what started it, but it proved to be a really long-term project because of the way I started and because I didn't have the initial funding and because essentially I'm a first-time director. I've worked on a lot of short films and I've done quite a lot of projects, but not having the accolades behind me just made it something I had to continue to dig deep and remember why I started it. And somehow for 10 years, I was still able to touch into that spark of inspiration, and that's what kept me going. And fast forward 10 years, I'm kind of just still shell-shocked to be premiering my film, world premiering this week. So,
people know Vermont for, maple syrup, Bernie Sanders, the woods. So how did design build pop up in this particular place?
That's a really good question. And in some ways, I spent way too long asking people kind of pointed questions about what's in the water here, why Vermont? And at some point, someone directed me to, there was I think it's a 6-part series called The Vermont Movie, which is really intriguing. If you're interested in Vermont at all, it's incredibly comprehensive history of Vermont. But the episode I watched was about the hippie movement, because I think people can also remember and think about the Back to the Land movement associated with Vermont. And
Ben and Jerry, of course.
And Ben and Jerry, yeah. Exactly. And Fish. I think there is a real deep spirit of entrepreneurial, ingenuitive, DIY, figure it out as you go. And I think that is hugely linked to the agricultural and farming history of Vermont. It used to be totally end of the road. I mean, even in the 70s when my parents moved there, it was, Warren was actually the end of the road. And I think for a lot of people in the 60s and 70s, they saw it as this kind of
Escape,
yeah. They could buy really fairly affordable farmland and they thought, well, we can just do it ourselves. I think realistically, what kind of finally answered it for me, and I'm finding myself referencing this time and time again, that they talked about in the Vermont movie is simply the state motto, which is freedom and unity. I'm kind of struck that for, the hundreds of years now that Vermont's been a state, that's been their motto, and that just rings so true to all of the things you just listed that are super Vermont, Vermonty. And it's this idea of both freedom in thought and inspiration and kind of sky's the limit in terms of if you need a barn to house your animals for the winter, you're going to do it and you need to do it. And there's a necessity there, but there's also, a freedom in, you mill your own lumber, you do it. But the unity part is equally important component to the Vermont spirit, which is this idea of community and collective thought, collective coming together to make something happen. And because it's such a small state, you can really see change. You can see how you personally can affect the wider community that you're living in, the small town, but as well at a state level. And so I think going back to your question, design build, how did that kind of come about? I think that same kind of optimistic excitement, that same ethos that a lot of the Back to Land hippies had, or that anyone who kind of moves to Vermont and buys into this ethos, there was just a real idea of we're going to go up into the woods and do whatever we want. And
Yeah, but at some point, some expertise entered into this because we're not just raising barns or putting shacks together. I mean, when did the real innovative architecture element hit?
That's a great question, and I wish that I could come from a more broad-reaching historical context. There are quite a number of examples of incredible architecture that have kind of happened in Vermont. But specifically in Warren, what happened was there were a group of Yale architects, and Dave Sellers, Charlie Hosford, a year or two later, Barry Simpson, Bill Reinecke was in the original group.
Peter Gluck,
Peter
right?
Gluck,
Yep.
yep. They graduated, and all of them on their own had some sort of building experience, whether it was working with their dad in their basement or working as a builder to pay for college. They all just couldn't believe that you could study architecture and be this white-collar kind of person on the job site directing people what to do if you had never yourself built. And they didn't understand the disconnect. And, a quote that Dave Sellers said, it didn't make it into the film, was just like, how can you tell someone how to dig a hole if you've never dug a hole? And I think that's fundamentally true for a lot of professions and a lot of ways of operating. But that really drove these guys to think about, how can we build the things that we're designing, and where can we find the freedom to really practice this design-led construction, or this focus on design, but with the component of building. And they landed in Warren, Vermont, because there was a ski resort there that was flourishing, Sugarbush Ski Resort. There were, wealthy clientele that wanted crazy ski chalets. And so, these guys pretty much, basically with not a lot of money and not a lot of experience, a lot of them had maybe never slung a hammer, moved to Vermont, and they started constructing these incredibly funky and crazy and innovative, very out there buildings that were, sculptures more than they were houses, I'd say. And because of financial constraints, used a lot of construction lumber in finished details, focused a lot on, plywood and plexiglass were materials at the time that were really affordable. And somehow, kind of full circle, the farms and the barns that I'm talking about, these guys who came from Yale, who started building and then attracted a whole range of architects, you could say disillusioned or disaffected architects who just wanted to be hands-on, who were like, I got into architecture because I'm an artist and I like making things. It really falls into that same category, and you could say now that this design-build movement in these homes that are in my film are deeply part of the Vermont vernacular that we're going to continue to learn about into the future. So,
at the same time, you had the energy crisis of the 70s, and I remember every magazine, Popular Science and everything, was talking about these new innovations in energy efficiency, they called it. It wasn't quite sustainability yet. We didn't have a climate crisis, but they were talking about the population explosion. I mean, it was the same sort of field, right, where we could be building differently. And these guys were trying to play around with that. What were some of the things they played around with?
Yeah, so my film, there's kind of distinct 3 decades to the film. And the 60s, like I just talked about, those guys really wanted to just push the envelope, but they were still inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright. They wanted to be preeminent architects in their own right. And they were up there building crazy chalets because they wanted their homes to kind of push that envelope. And then what happened is architects would come up and work on the site. And so probably 5, 6 years after those original guys got there, there was a second wave of architects who came up who definitely had a different sort of thought process. And so Bill McClay, an architect who came out of this movement, he and Jim Sanford and Richard Travers, the 3 of them were, maybe 22 years old. They ended up building, kind of part of the second decade, 1970s. They built a 6-unit, basically condominium, which at the time was co-housing before co-housing even had a word. This was 1972, I'd say. they also, didn't have a lot of building experience. So there was the same kind of just pure optimistic kind of empowerment that got them to just say, let's just do it. They used the term "just do it," Trav said, before Nike
Right.
coined the term. And that was all about what we now call sustainability. They had 2 wind turbines on the property. There's a whole wind company that came out of Prickly Mountain. And that's another kind of piece of the puzzle, is it wasn't just architecture and design, but there's a whole host of businesses, many of them that were trying to be a solution for the energy crisis, or for this, how do we impact the earth less?
Yes.
In 1972 onwards, that came out of this kind of same whole group. They played around with active solar, which didn't actually end up working, but I've talked.
What is active solar?
Interestingly, probably
I know passive solar.
Yeah, so probably in the end, Dimetrodon should have been oriented 180 degrees opposite to what it is. So basically, south-facing is, since there have been retrofitted windows and things put in, but originally it's this huge roof that they created like a water holding system on this roof. So sun would hit the south-facing
Sun would hit the water and heat it?
That would then operate as this kind of active solar. So using the solar to create energy, as opposed to the idea of passive solar would have been to move the building 180 and have all of the window-facing bits of the building facing the sun.
Okay,
So
but where did this hot water go to?
They also had a whole boiler system, and that was really successful. And so essentially in their basement, they had water tanks and a giant furnace that, Jim said you could put bricks of National Geographics in there and they would instantly go up in flames. You could put almost an entire tree. It was really long. And so that would operate, as a furnace, you get it really warm. And there were 6 families that lived at Dimetrodon in these various units eventually,
That was the name of the condos.
It was the name of the building. Different families would be in charge of stoking it every week, different weeks. And that would heat the tank up, and then there were a bunch of different channels, so essentially radiant heat. The water would then go to various parts of the building.
Okay.
And so that would heat the building.
Yeah.
So at one point, Bill did describe the active solar in depth a bit more, but I know that pretty quickly they realized it didn't really work. I've since talked to another member of the community who is really active with the sustainability piece of what came out, and he just kind of mentioned that just as important as the innovations that have become commercial and successful and that we know about, it's really important to have this, as you call it, kind of graveyard of ideas.
Yeah.
Because that's obviously what helps propel innovation forward. So, yeah, I think that was another big piece of the puzzle of this whole community, was seeing failure as opportunity, seeing it as part of a way to learn and progress.
So let's fast forward now to the 2010s and the 2020s. What is the status of architecture in Vermont now? What's getting built there?
I think one of the hardest pieces of the puzzle is when I originally started the film, I wanted it to be this sleek, coming from action sports advertisement. This film's about design. I wanted it to kind of be more comparable to something like Helvetica, where we're taking a kind of a niche subject.
Helvetica is a film about a font, folks.
It's a film about a font. And
Yes.
For me, that was a comparable I would reference because it was informational, but it also made you really deeply think about something you wouldn't have otherwise thought about. The difference is Helvetica, everyone interacts with the typeface every day. Design build, not so much. I think a lot of us are familiar with design build, something where we understand it to be a business that has both designers and builders under the same umbrella. But what I'm talking about here in Vermont is the architect is the designer and the builder. They are the master builder.
Mm-hmm.
They're under one human. They know how to build. And
Were there any prohibitions against this? Because I know in North Carolina for a long time, architects could not be builders, and the way they got around it was to form 2 separate companies and have each one kind of interact with each other. Was that the same way in Vermont?
I don't think so. I think A big thing to name is that there are no building codes on residential homes. And that is, I think, linked once again to the farming.
The freedom, too.
The freedom
Yeah.
aspect. It's if you need to build a barn for your animals, you can do it. I mean, obviously there's zoning and there's permitting, but that was definitely a huge reason why the buildings are the way they are. I think things are changing a bit more. And so what I wanted it to be about design build, and then I started really broadly wanting to talk about the design build movement in Chile that was happening at the time. There is a movement that was happening in France. And, I think design build isn't unique to just the Mad River Valley of Vermont, but what I recognized was my access to that community and my experience growing up in that specific community was really where the story is. And my editor made the call to name the film Prickly Mountain. I mean, that's how I've always described it. It's the prickly people. It's the prickly float in the 4th of July. People know the prickly community. Let's just name it what it is. And that kind of really helped me and also forced me to hone in on doing a history of Prickly Mountain, which is East Warren, Vermont. Warren is a town of less than 2,000 people. And so I guess I want to just say I don't have a deep history of architecture as a whole in Vermont. But what I will say is that I was just sitting at a wedding. My friend is a timber framer last weekend, and kind of recognizing there's so many timber framers in Vermont, and there are a lot of design build architects and design builders and craftsmen. And I think what you'll still find in Vermont is a focus on craftsmanship and a focus on being an active part of the process. As materials have skyrocketed, as there's a rampant housing crisis all over Vermont, I don't know what we're starting to see, but I think the ways in which the design build movement kind of presented themselves in the 70s, that spirit still resonates deeply with the people in Vermont.
The film is Prickly Mountain, and you can see it where?
So right now we are world premiering at the Architecture and Design Film Festival here in New York City.
And will it go to other cities too?
Yep, we'll be in LA and then Vancouver, Toronto, hopefully Chicago. And our goal is to push it to as many film festivals as possible through 2026 and then hopefully find a happy home with a distributor.
Or streaming somewhere?
Yes, streaming somewhere, even if it's on our website via Vimeo
or something.
Pay.
And we'll have it at the NC Modernist Film Festival in early 2026.
Exactly, yeah.
Thanks for talking with me, Allie.
Thank you, yeah.
You just heard George talking with Allie Rood. Beck Carpenter is a filmmaker, visual artist, and storyteller whose latest film, The Space Architect, chronicles the life and visionary work of NASA architect Constance Adams. Carpenter captures her groundbreaking designs for lunar and Martian habitats and her later efforts to apply lessons from space to Earth's climate challenges. Filmed only 4 days before Constance Adams died of cancer, The Space Architect shows her reflecting on a remarkable career and her final urgent mission, applying space design innovations to tackle climate change. From New York, here's George's conversation with Beck Carpenter.
Beck, before we talk about your movie, let's talk about another movie.
Okay.
Hidden Figures.
Yes.
Which came out in 2016.
Yes.
So for people that haven't seen that movie, what was it about?
Well, I'm going to make a plug first for my friend Lori Lake in Hutcherson, who was one of the uncredited writers on Hidden Figures.
Was that a hidden figure of the Hidden Figures?
Yes, she was a hidden figure of the Hidden Figures. And it was 3 women who, behind the scenes, made an incredible contribution to the space program, who we never would have known about had it not been for that film.
Okay.
The public at large would never have known about them were it not for that film.
Outside of the industry.
Correct. And maybe even within the industry, because there is a little bit of amnesia sometimes about the huge numbers of contributors to these kinds of large-scale projects.
And these are also black women, too, which was another reason why that was suppressed.
Yes.
So your film is about another woman in the space industry. Who was that?
Constance Adams. Yeah, Constance Adams is the architect of record, along with Chris Kennedy, for a little house called Transhab. It was the first human-rated inflatable house or spacecraft that humans could use to get to Mars and back.
So is this part of a spaceship, or is it something you build when you land on Mars?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
So initially, they designed it for living on space station. It had such a larger square footage, and because it was inflatable and it was layers of inflatable materials, it was cheaper to transport. So you use less fuel to get off planet, you can take more stuff up there, it inflates, you have more space. All the things that we need sort of psychologically to recognize ourselves as human would be more readily available in this larger space.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to go to Mars, you can also use this to live in for, I think Constance said it's 400 plus days at that time, to go to Mars and back. It will inflate and you will get to Mars on it. You can build another one when you get to Mars, and then you can come back. I don't really understand the mechanism of getting from the inflatable housing to Mars and back onto it. However, right now, Artemis is planning on using an inflatable structure as part of their journey to getting humans to create some sort of a sustained human colony on the moon. They're also planning on using 3D printing to make permanent housing using materials already on the moon. So there are a lot of different things that they're exploring right now, but inflatable housing will be one of them.
Was she involved at all as a technical advisor for The Martian?
That's a great question. I have a letter between her and James Cameron going through a number of different things, and she disagreed with him in some places and some decisions that he made. So I would say in the end, no. Was she part of a conversation that was part of his information gathering? Yes, she was.
Because The Martian was really detailed about how you got to Mars, how you built around Mars. They had like a backup ship on the planet, and then, the 400 days thing of getting back to Earth. I mean, it was just like this is something we do every day, like we fly to Minnesota.
Right. Well, yeah, it's not like flying to Minnesota, but it is amazing how movies can make it seem like, on the one hand, oh, look, this is really easy. Humans know how to do this. And then, of course, every film has the moment where you realize that everything that humans need to survive off planet, they need to bring with them. And if anything happens to it, they're sort of screwed. And then human ingenuity needs to save them where they are.
Yeah.
And then other films talk about the psychological implications of getting to this place and discovering you don't have everything you need, including other human beings.
Right. Now, how did you meet Constance?
I met Constance freshman week of college. I'm from the Midwest. I was sort of a first-generation college student, deeply curious, definitely not as smart as the people I was meeting, including Constance. Constance's father was a world-class medievalist. She had traveled the world exploring medieval culture and how communities were formed and insider-outsider status, and she was really steeped in this sort of history. And you just knew when you first met her that she was going to do something big.
Yeah.
We went our separate ways. We were not close friends in college. I was an athlete. I was really interested in film. She was much more interested in design and architecture and social change through that. I was much more interested in revolution, grassroots movements, and working class. We re-met at our 30th reunion. I bumped into her. We started talking. We had lunch. I have the picture. It's in one of our press photos. And we ended up spending the entire reunion together. I've got pictures of us dancing at one of the evening events. And we had so much in common 30 years later. We were both single moms.
Ah, okay.
We both had gone through the same arc, although on different levels, of wanting the world to be better for everyone and finding that there were so many institutional obstacles to that. And yet there was so much institutional power that institutions could create change with the right impetus and pressure. And at the time, I was going to do a podcast about women with cool jobs.
Okay.
And Constance was going to be my first interview. And then she was diagnosed with cancer. And I just said to her, what can I do? She said, I have a lot to get in order. She didn't tell me in the beginning that it was terminal. I try to imagine myself in her situation
Yeah.
with my daughter. And I just sort of tracked, we stayed in touch. At a certain point, she said, "Can you come now with a camera?" I said, "Okay." And I'll be honest, I didn't know a lot about the details of her career. I knew the broad strokes of her career, but because we met at 50, or re-met at 50, that wasn't really what was first and foremost on our minds.
Right.
Right?
More of a social connection.
It was the interpersonal. It was the tribe of women who were raising our children alone. We were delivering to them a world that was not the world that we had hoped to deliver to them. We hadn't given up on wanting things to be different, but wondering where we could contribute and what that would look like. So I very quickly did as much research as I could about her career, hired a crew locally, got on a plane, went to Houston, did this interview over the course of 2 days, actually, and she was very, very ill. I knew she was very ill, but when someone is telling you that they're very ill in text,
They're ill. Yeah.
Right, we spoke on the phone, and she was a person who could, as you'll see in the film, who could be really energetic, and she could really make herself forceful and a presence, and she could do that on the phone. So it was shocking even to me to see, if you could see what I look like now, and when you see the film, see what she looks like in the film, you really understand how ill she was.
Yes.
Because she probably looks 15 years older.
Okay.
Anyway, so that was really how it started.
Okay. And how long until she passed away from that set of interviews?
4 days.
4 days.
4
Wow.
days.
You really got there in the nick of time.
Yeah, it was shocking.
Were you still in Houston when she passed?
No, I came back. I was there for 2 days. We spent a day going through her archives. You'll see in the film there's a room filled with boxes that she had already organized. And I started to go through all the boxes and to sort of scan things and photograph things while I was there, thinking, oh, I've got a couple months, I'll come back. Once I've made sense of some of this. And then she died, and I went back the next week. Fortunately, I met a woman in Houston who had worked for NASA in the communications and archiving department. She knew a lot of the projects that Constance had been a part of.
Yeah.
She understood the scope and scale of the projects, so she knew where to look to help orient me to Constance's place within that project, which was, her name is Debbie Bivens. She was immensely helpful.
Constance really was involved in quite a few things. She was involved in the X-38 crew return vehicle, the orbital space plane, the International Space Station, the H-2 transfer vehicle integration, and then, all of these things that were kind of on the boards, too.
Yes. At that time, Constance worked at Johnson Space Center. She was not an employee of NASA. She was a contractor at different times to different entities, JPL or Lockheed Martin, Japanese Space Station. Her office was at Johnson Space Center. She would get hired onto these projects as an architect, and this was a new idea, to have an architect on a project designing, whether it was control panels for a plane or housing or envisioning what these sort of modular housing might look like. So she would have a piece in it. And I think that for a layperson like me, it took me a minute to really understand how each piece on these projects was really important. You think about driving your car. Well, what if the start button for your car was actually underneath the dash on the lower left?
Right.
And every time you went to start your car, you had to kind of go under there. Well, you would learn to do it over time, but it's not a natural impulse, right? Most people are right-handed. You put it on the right, along with the gear shifts. That was not true in a lot of space vehicles. They had been put together by engineers who were trying to cram a lot of equipment in and a lot of functional things.
It wasn't true like in fighter planes, for instance.
Exactly.
Until more recently.
Exactly. So architects coming on board were people who helped sort of address some of these intuitive user
kind of concerns.
And this brings me to something that is really important and sort of mind-blowing. And people now talk a lot about design thinking. it seems like it's a trend or that it's trendy. I'm here to say that it's not. I think all really good work, actually, no matter what field you're in, starts with talking to the people who are the end users. And one of Constance's major contributions was really esoteric, which is discovering a field that she ended up calling sociokinetics, which is she interviewed generations and generations of previous astronauts, asking them about the spaces that they occupied when they were traveling to the moon or orbiting or on space station, so she could understand what their true needs were, not just their survival needs. This was really a breakthrough in terms of recognizing that food, shelter, clothing are the basic constituents of human life. But we're such evolved creatures.
More or less.
More or less, thank you. We need so much more to thrive. And I feel like that was really, at the end of the day, for me, understanding how much she loved human beings. You asked me about her contributions to these projects.
Yeah.
She had a piece in many of them. Sometimes it was designing a medical emergency kit, right? But what Constance was driven by was a really deep love of humanity, which is ironic because she could be caustic and she admittedly could be short with people if they didn't understand her right away or they didn't share her values. But she had a brilliant mind for mapping out things from the smallest level to the largest conceptual level. She loved architecture. She loved the potential of architecture to solve social problems. She loved these engineers that she worked with. She loved engineering minds. She grew to love planet Earth because she began to understand that this was the only planet that was really suited to human life and that we had evolved here, and that this was the planet that really could provide us with everything that we need. And she loved her children.
Yeah. How many children did she have?
2.
And were they in the film?
They are not in the film. Ultimately, I decided that I would try to stay really true to this conversation that we had and stick close to the bone of the topics that she wanted to talk about. She really wanted to pay homage to these people who she had worked with and the brilliant minds that she had encountered. I think she felt that a lot of the documentation about the space program overlooks the engineers and some of the people behind the scenes, Chuck Wainwright, Jim Maida, who are like the lighting experts. I mean, you don't think about that, but it's a huge component, right? So anyway, I feel like I'm babbling now a little bit.
No. Now, if you ask most people how many space stations there are, they'll say 1. But that's not true, is it?
There have been more than one space station. Mir was one.
Right. Skylab was one.
Skylab was one.
But also other countries have them up, right? Doesn't China have one up right now?
That's a really good question. I'm not tracking what China is doing, but you're probably right.
Chinese space station. We're going to Google this live. The Tiangong space station is China's permanently crewed station in low Earth orbit. Almost no one realizes there's one up there.
Well, thank you, because I didn't. I feel like I try to stay up on this. I think that one of the really interesting things about you saying that is the Chinese are so advanced in everything. They're taking climate adaptation really seriously. They are light years ahead of us in their anticipation of what's going to happen here. I think that if we really wanted to preserve life as we know it, we would look to the Chinese.
It's docked in low Earth orbit between 340 and 450 kilometers above the surface.
When did it launch?
It launched in 2021.
Okay.
And has been put together over a series of years, right?
Yep.
It has 12,000 cubic feet
Wow.
inside. I mean, it's really pretty big.
Yeah. Now I have my homework.
Yeah. That could be the sequel.
Right? Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, I sometimes think that in our current, very divided political scene, when I go home to Texas, nobody who I meet thinks that the climate isn't changing. They may not agree on what's causing the change,
Yeah.
but it's observable. There are droughts, serious droughts and serious floods in the area of Texas that I go home to. I think it's really important that we look to solutions for this. And one of the things that Constance did that I thought was so fascinating, which ultimately was what compelled me to finish the film, because there were many times where I thought, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to accurately portray her incredible mind, and the truth of what she's saying. Because her final thesis was, we can take all this technology and this way of thinking, and we can bring it back here to Earth, and we can use it to anticipate and adapt to climate change as this climate becomes increasingly hostile to human life. I had to really wrap my head around that. I wouldn't have said prior to making the film that I didn't believe in climate change. I did. I was definitely a person who thought it's so big, aside from recycling and not having to buy this year's fashion,
Right.
and taking a shorter shower and eating foods that aren't so packaged because I have the luxury of making all those choices. I really didn't know what else I could do. When I looked at this document, the Mothership Project that she had created, the way that she thought about technology, for instance, there are indigenous peoples who had to deal with extreme cold, extreme heat, who were nomadic, the earliest migrants. We can look to some of those technologies and understand how we could adapt some of our technology in a really sort of fundamental way. There are ways that the animal kingdom, flora and fauna, have of adapting, right? Constance was really intrigued by these ideas. The other concept that Constance introduced to me was this tiger team idea that NASA uses when they want to solve a problem in an entirely new way. They'll put together a team, people from diverse fields, they'll give them the problem, the constraints, and say, run with it.
Right.
No holds barred. Well, what if we did that? In this document that she's created, the Mothership Project, she basically spells out these different arenas that we're going to want to look at and suggests what the tiger teams are that we could put together to problem solve these areas.
Can people see this document anywhere?
Yes, they can. If you go to our website, www.thespacearchitect.com, we have 3 prongs of our social impact campaign, for lack of a better phrase to describe it. The first one is we're going to use social media to promote the document. And each week, when the film goes wide, we're going to launch a new bullet point of the document. And we're going to invite people on social media to share the technologies that they're familiar with or that they've discovered or that are happening now. And in a way, populate the document in sort of an open source way to start this solutions-oriented conversation. And hopefully also trigger some people who may be resistant or too afraid to look at it to go, oh, wait a second, look at all this amazing stuff that's happening in the energy sector or the food sector. Another prong of it is going to be, which is also on our website, we've created an interdisciplinary Tiger Team college course. The syllabus is free to anybody who's curious to look at it. And we provide the provocations, meaning, okay, if you live in an area that's drought prone or flood prone or where you're going to have cold snaps that are more extreme than ever before, we're going to create a team. It might consist of an engineering student, somebody who's working in space, somebody who's in engineering, maybe civil engineering, mechanical engineering, a communications student, maybe an anthropology student. And they'll take a problem, they'll have a semester to sort of create a solution using their own Tiger Team approach as a way of prototyping the process that Constance talks about and also see what some cool solutions are. And the third thing that we're going to do is do a high school class sort of science fair challenge where we specifically ask kids to look through these lenses of indigenous technology, biomimicry, space technology, and see how it could be used to address a local issue that that student might be concerned with, whatever region they're living in. So I did my best to do what she asked me to do, which is tell the stories of these amazing minds that she had encountered as she played her role on these projects, to publicize the Mothership Project as a way of using Tiger Teams to creatively problem solve the way that they had at NASA, and using these Tiger Teams instead here on Earth to address these critical issues of climate adaptation for humans and plant life. So.
The film is The Space Architect. Thanks so much for talking with me, Beck.
All right, thank you so much.
That was George's conversation with Beck Carpenter. Danny Berish and Ryan Ma are co-founders of Black Rhino Creative and the filmmakers behind Arthur Erickson, Beauty Between the Lines, exploring the life and work of one of Canada's most celebrated architects. The film follows Erickson's rise in the 1960s, his setbacks in the 1980s, and his eventual comeback from nights at Studio 54 to summers with Shirley MacLaine and Elizabeth Taylor. George started his conversation with Ryan and Danny by asking a rather non-architectural question.
Gentlemen, I want to ask your expertise in a particular social situation that I know you have some experience with. Let's say that my wife and I, for the first time, are invited to a nude picnic. What's the protocol? How should we behave?
Wow, you did your research.
You definitely did your research. Well, I would say step one, bring a towel.
Bring a towel, okay.
Yes.
What for? What do I bring the towel for?
You definitely need a towel. Whenever you're sitting down anywhere, it is etiquette to place a towel on a seat,
Okay.
Wherever you sit, to keep everything nice and clean.
Yeah. Floppy hat and sunscreen. It's good.
Sunscreen and a towel. It's just like going to the beach. Just
Okay.
in a bathing suit.
Yeah.
What's the floppy hat for?
Just keep your sun out of your eyes.
Okay. I didn't know if that was a special thing for my nude picnic.
This is a good question.
Anything else in terms of how I should act around these people? Because this is our first time, so how do we behave?
Well, you have constant eye contact at all times. Otherwise than that, it's a pretty chill experience.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I did one of these years ago.
Okay.
And learned, but I learned through error, actually. I had no idea, what it was before I went to it. And people were very annoyed with me because I had not been briefed on the protocol. So as a public service for people who are doing this future.
Yes.
And you guys did a film about this, right?
Many, many, many years ago, yes. Yeah, it was on Canada's oldest nudist club.
Okay.
Yeah, that happens to be in Vancouver. It was our COVID film.
It was our COVID project. We needed to stay about at least 6 feet away from people and yet still be outside. So
And it was the perfect movie to do because you're outside and you're always 6 feet away.
Well, isn't that sort of the protocol when there's not a pandemic? I mean, I remember at this picnic, people sort of had this space bubble around them that was bigger than normally when you're enclosed.
Oh, interesting.
Did you notice that at all?
I didn't really notice that, did you?
No, I don't remember that. Yeah, especially in the sauna.
Yeah. I mean, when I'm standing in line for my coleslaw and potato chips and hot dog,
Sure.
I had to have like a 2.5 foot space. Really, I could feel between the woman in line next to me.
Yeah. You might have been in a bigger club where there was more space.
Yeah, where was this club? Where was your club?
This was a house that was just having a picnic that I got invited
I see.
to. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well,
That sounds like something completely different.
Well, let's segue now into Arthur Erickson.
Wow.
Sure.
You're the first to do that segue.
Oh, that is a good segue. Yeah.
Wow. What can I tell? Well, the parties. That's where you could segue from.
And there are pictures of Arthur that we found that were very revealing. And he was a very artistic and bon vivant kind of guy.
Yes.
So Arthur spent some time on Fire Island, which is known for Horace Gifford being sort of the main forces there. Were they buddies or did they hang out together about the same time?
That's a really good question. We didn't dig that far deep into his friends on Fire Island. I mean, the big thing was just finding people that were honestly still alive.
Yeah.
To make those connections.
Because what years was he there?
I would say 80s for sure.
80s, okay.
80s.
Yeah. He had a place here in Manhattan. He had a place in Vancouver. And Fire Island was really the personification of his gay life with his partner, Francisco Gripaz.
Yeah. It was definitely their escape, for sure. I mean, it's a beautiful house, but it was, in the movie, we revealed that it wasn't really talked about in the office. It was kind of like a hush-hush. But yeah, that was their getaway, and that's where they had some epic parties. Yes.
Well, Fire Island is known for that, right?
Yes.
Now, how did Arthur Erickson come to prominence in Vancouver?
Well, I mean, he is a true Vancouverite. I mean, he studied at UBC. He taught at UBC, and he lives there. His home base is there, and his principal office was there when he first started.
But his big project that kind of like put him on the map was a university called SFU, and him and his business partner kind of had a competition to basically design a brand new university on the top of a mountain. So he used his references from the Acropolis and his travels all over the world and built a temple on the side of a mountain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that really launched his career. And then at the time too, I think his connection to Vancouver Vancouver back in the 60s was just like, it was no New York. I mean, it still isn't in New York, but it was just loads of parking lots and just a lot of just industrial kind of honestly wasted space. It wasn't really utilized. So he had an opportunity to really shape that in the 70s, 80s with redesigning 4 city blocks of like what would become the law courts. And this just beautiful strip in Vancouver that's got some park features in it. That is really just it's like a small moment in time that I don't know how would you get the keys to 4 city blocks in Metropolitan City? Like it's just, it wouldn't happen ever again. But he was there at the right time.
And I know of him through his houses. Mm-hmm. So many beautiful houses throughout that area and the surrounding larger area.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, beautiful homes. I mean, what's your favorite home, Denny?
I really loved Epic 2. So Epic 1 and Epic 2 were 2 homes built on West Vancouver, and they were built for the Epic brothers, who were big in steel. And they wanted them to be completely different and somewhat similar at the same time. So if you look at the blueprints of both homes, on paper look the same, but in terms of the materials that they used, one was this kind of concrete brutalist, and 2 was this very 80s chic, steel structure with a pool that could have been, placed and dropped in California, but it was in West Vancouver, and it really is a personification of his relationship with his partner Francisco, where they were using different materials, glossy, kind of shiny materials, and very, very just fancy materials, and it's a beautiful home, and it's been restored to its present day form.
So was Erickson out as a gay man during his career?
I don't think it was ever really official, but I mean, I think he's got his business life was very separate from his personal life. So when he was at the office, he kept things within the office, and I think some people knew but just didn't ask. Mm-hmm. And again, the Fire Island House was part of that, right? He really wanted to keep them very separate for obvious reasons in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where being gay wasn't accepted, and he's working on Middle East projects, so he really kept that very separate. But I think people outside the circle of the work, so people definitely knew. And he would go to these parties and network with Francisco. And so it was very clear. But he, even his family, who we interview, his nieces and nephews, they didn't find out until they were in their teens.
Okay. So pretty late.
Pretty late, mm-hmm. And they were like, oh, it's Uncle Francisco, and they knew, but we talked to Jeffrey, and he's like, oh, geez, I never would have thought of that. But yeah, so.
Now, what led to his problems with money and downfall and kind of the spiral that he got into? What kicked that off?
I think Arthur was an artist and a creative first, and definitely his head was definitely into creating visionary works of art, and he was never driven by the money side of things. It was just part of his world. So I think he ultimately ended up overextending himself by having offices in Dubai and in the Middle East. There were lots of factors that kind of led to his financial demise.
And then there was his partnership with Francisco. I mean, the way they worked was Francisco would be network, to earn the big bucks, you've got to spend the money, and you have to hang out with people with lots of money and the networking. And so that's what they would do. And they would hang out with A-list celebrities, but that costs money to keep that lifestyle going. But Francisco was all about the high life, and so that was kind of what they do. He would go out, get the clients, Arthur would go in, and they would execute, and they would work together. But the high life just took over, and I think the parties they threw. I mean, there's one line in the movie where we interviewed the office manager, the Toronto office manager, and he said he got a bill from the accountant. He's like, "What is this?" And it's a bill for $40,000 for a party that Erickson threw in the 90s.
In the 90s. This
was in the 80s or 90s, and
that's an expensive party in the 80s.
That was just for the flowers.
You know, it's $40,000 for just the flowers.
Oh.
Yeah. So, you know, you can see where this could go. And the spending, you know, I mean, there's loads of stories to the point where, you know, whether we go bankrupt and there's no money for printed paper or to pay your contractors or your staff. So, yeah, things got pretty dire near the end.
Was he on the build side too? Did he do construction as well?
He definitely worked with people. I don't know. I mean, he was really known for doing site visits, sometimes sleeping the night to really understand the landscape. But I don't know if he was so much involved in the construction side of it, though.
And so how did his death come about?
Well, what year was this?
I think it was in the 90s, or no, early 2000s maybe.
Yes.
Yes. And he was diagnosed with dementia.
Yes, we allude to that. I don't know if it was 100%. He was showing signs of it for sure. Mm-hmm. You know, he had to get checked into a hospital. Things were getting pretty bad, and then he just passed away. Honestly, yeah, from that.
And since then, history's been pretty kind to him. People have started to recognize his accomplishments, you know, in Vancouver and in other places. So what are some of the buildings that people might want to go look at or visit that really exemplify Erickson's genius?
I would say go to the Museum of Anthropology. It is a very sacred place, and when you walk into that space, you really feel the weight of his love for travel, indigenous art. It really is a beautiful space. It's one of my favorites.
If you're in Tacoma, just south of Seattle, is the Tacoma Museum of Glass, which would ultimately become kind of one of his last buildings. And it's stunning. It's just this very cone-shaped building. There's like a glass blowing workshop, which audiences can kind of watch the process of glass blowing and a beautiful gallery around it. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. Oh, well, and then Toronto, the Roy Thompson Hall is just a gem in Toronto. It's a beautiful concert performance hall that Arthur designed. And, you know, there's a socializing aspect when you go to see theater and glamour. And so he designed a circular concert hall where people could kind of constantly walk around in circles and socialize.
I mean, that was part of the efforts for us. It was like, let's put Arthur on the map for, you know, all of Canada, all of the U.S. and international, because really he was one of the greatest architects of the 20th century, and I had not really heard of him before I moved to Vancouver. So, you know, it was really, really, really special for me to be able to share that.
Were there buildings on the East Coast, since he was partying here, that he designed?
I mean, the biggest one I can think of is the embassy, the Canadian embassy in Washington, D.C. That was a really big project for him.
Yeah.
There was some controversy, though, with regards to the embassy.
To the embassy? Yeah. So when Arthur had gone to school in Magellan, he was really good friends with Trudeau.
Okay.
Pierre Trudeau.
Pierre Trudeau.
Yes. And when Pierre Trudeau, and when he got elected into office several years later, there was a call for proposals, and the proposals went out, and there was an architect that was selected for this project. So in the movie, we kind of reenact the scene where the office manager tells Erickson, you know, we didn't get the project. And through a whole multitude of things, Erickson is like, we really need this project. Did he need the money because things were getting dire? Maybe. Or did he just really want the project? We'll never really know.
Yeah.
But he phoned the prime minister and said, you know, Pierre's like, we need this project. Like, we really need this project. And so Trudeau pulled the card and says, okay, forget the guy who actually won the contract. You're going to get it.
Yeah.
And that's how it was built. You know,
and what year was this about?
The embassy was designed in 1989.
In 89. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, embassy design is such a wonderful segment of architecture all around the world, because you're trying to create a facility that has some very specific purposes, but is also supposed to exemplify your country and its values.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so there are marvelous examples of that all around. I got to visit the Finland embassy in Washington, D.C., which is absolutely gorgeous building.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like a fortress like a lot of these buildings do. Because, you know, to be honest, everybody loves Finland, right?
Right, sure.
Yeah, sure.
Free healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Erickson, it had to exemplify Canada, obviously. And there's an atrium where there's kind of glass that covers a certain part of it, and he really wanted to exemplify just how open and vast Canada was. And obviously the color red, because of the flag, is a main color throughout. The furniture design that he did with Francisco, and there's a theater, it's red seats, it looked pretty good.
Well, to wrap up, Danny, I want to ask you a question about Chinese food.
Okay.
So I've always heard that the best Chinese food outside of China is either in Edinburgh or Vancouver. Is that true? What do you think?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, New York's got some really good food, but Vancouver, I would say, has some incredible food. So if you're ever in town, we'll come visit us.
Yeah.
And how do you know about all this? What was the project you worked on where you learned about this?
We worked on a show called House Special, and it's all about exploring Chinese food through small town restaurants. It's more Ryan's story because he is Chinese.
It is, but there is a tradition on Christmas Day.
Yes, all good Jews find themselves in a Chinese restaurant on Christmas. Yeah.
That was another fun project, and honestly, off to the next one, whatever that might be.
What is the next one for you guys?
The one that I am working on right now and we're in development is all about the founder of freestyle skiing, which was a man named Wayne Wong. So in the 70s, when skiing was all about this Austrian kind of very austere kind of way of skiing, it's very, very strict and demanding, and it's all about racing. Here comes these hippie misfits that were like, hey, let's just flip off this rock and do the most entertaining thing we can. And that started a wave of freestyle skiing.
Well, gentlemen, this has been fun. Thank you so much for coming and talking with me.
No problem.
Thank you for having us.
That was Ryan Ma and Danny Berish talking with George at the Architecture and Design Film Festival in New York.
There's a port on a western bay, and it serves, maybe 100 ships a day. Lonely sailors pass the time away and talk about their homes. And there's a girl in this harbor town who plays the bass and also sings. And that's our guest today, Brandi Disterheft. Hi, Brandi.
Hi, George. How are you doing?
Have you ever done that song in performance?
We do it all the time in performance.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
The rhythms of it make it feel, it's very contrapuntal, so it feels you're sort of trying to balance on a surfboard.
Yeah. Now, I know that song was really big when the Guardians of the Galaxy movies came out. They had a lot of airplay on that. And it's hard to believe this song is now 53 years old.
Right.
I saw a lot of mentions about you and Oscar Peterson. Did you actually get to meet him?
I did get to meet him. Yes, he was receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award, and I was in the house band. And then he said some very positive acclamations about my playing, and I did get to meet him. Yeah, that was a great honor because, of course, I grew up listening to his music. It really moved me, and it's a big reason why I started playing the bass and enjoying jazz.
And when was that?
I was in my 20s, so just last year. No, I'm just kidding. It was quite a few years ago now. But my mom's a jazz piano player from Chicago, so I grew up, listening to the albums she was listening to, and of course, that was one of the staple ones.
Oscar Peterson said, "She is what we call serious." That's some high praise.
Yeah, he said that I have the same lope as his late bassist, Ray Brown. So that rhythm.
Yeah.
I know he was quite the trickster, and he loved to play games, and he would detune Ray Brown's bass before he walked on stage. And I'm friendly with his daughter, Celine Peterson. She's the one putting on all these centennial concerts.
Right, because he would have turned 100.
100.
Yes.
Yeah. And she's also lovely, and she also has his wonderful sense of humor.
Well, tell me about this first song, Surfboard.
So I've been in New York now for 16 years, and I met this elder drummer, Porcino. He's now 88, and he played with everyone from Tanya Maria to Harry Belafonte. And anyway, he really refined me as a Brazilian bass player, and he would say, "Brandi, don't do this. Brandi, try this." So this was actually one of the songs in his book. And I just fell in love with it. And then later I heard the vocal version, and it just captured me. It definitely has a mood. And there's a wonderful video we have online too. And I featured some fantastic female surfers. It's out of Hawaii. So it's really fun to listen and watch that on YouTube.
I've seen that. It's really great. You're walking around on the beach and the surfers are doing their thing.
Yep.
Here's Brandi with Surfboard. Brandi, you have performed with a lot of jazz greats, Hank Jones, Benny Green, Vincent Herring, and all over the world, Japan, Canada, Europe, the U.S., Carnegie Hall. What's coming up for you in 2026? Where are you going to be that people can see you?
Well, I'm finishing up my 6th album, and then we'll be touring around. I'm playing all the time in New York City. So if you come to New York City, I'm often at Lincoln Center, you know, the Mesro Jazz Club and Birdland and clubs like that.
Okay.
I am at the Wilmington, North Carolina Jazz Festival in February, so that would be fun.
Oh, that would be great. That's very close to us here.
Oh, great.
Tell me about your family. Your aunt was a Grammy-winning session singer.
Yes.
And your mom has been a musician. How did they influence you coming up?
Yeah, I began playing with my mom, in her trio, and she taught me all the songs, by ear, 'cause so much of it's by ear. Of course, I did piano growing up. So that's really the trick of it, right? To be off the page and internalize those old standards. And then my aunt, she's still working hard in Los Angeles, and I grew up listening to her albums. She's featured on the Sergio Mendes album and Claire Fisher, Barry Manilow, and, she's worked with all these greats. So it was sort of both the singing and then the playing. Very much strong females, as a musical family. So I really wanted to pursue that. And I love composing. So that's very gratifying for me to, be singing and recording my songs.
How many singers are there who also play the bass? I could only find one.
Who's your one?
You.
Oh, no. Well, Sting.
Okay. Really? I didn't know that about Sting.
And Paul McCartney.
Okay.
Charles Mingus.
All right.
And Slam Stewart, going back to the 1930s, is gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Esperanza Spalding. There's quite a few. An interviewer asked me not too long ago, what's it like following a trend, playing the bass and singing? And I thought that was funny.
That is
funny.
One
decides to be a jazz musician to follow a trend. Well, at least not in this day and age.
Yeah. It's a very small trend, though, you got to say.
A niche.
Here's Brandi with If Dreams Come True.
If dreams come true, I'll be with you. I love that light in your eyes. You seem a dream in disguise. With your caress, I found happiness and love in view. If dreams come true, if dreams come true, I'll be with you. I love that light in your eyes. You seem a dream in disguise. With your caress, I find happiness and love in view. If dreams come true. dreams come true. I'll be with you. I love that light in your eyes. You seem a dream in disguise. With your caress I find happiness and love and view. If dreams come true. Thank you very much.
Brandi, I want to ask you just kind of an offbeat question about the bass. So how do you travel with it? I mean, do you have to like buy it a seat on an airplane? How does it work?
Well, in New York City, I like my wheel, and then you're just walking up and up and up and down flights of subway stairs with sometimes like a 10-pound amp on your back. So very much in shape, very much have to eat all my calories.
Yeah.
But flying wise, I did get my bass cut in half. And so the neck comes off and you take these two cases because the big flight cases almost became obsolete. But this is all long gone now. So now all you do is you ride on your rider. I would like an upright bass, please, with a pickup, and then I'm good to go. So now it's very easy.
Oh, so they provide it?
Mm-hmm. Just like a drum set or a...
Okay. Well, that's great.
It's great. I just had to bring my bow.
But how do you know they're going to get you a good bass as opposed to somebody's cousin who has one in their basement?
Right. Well, that's part of the game. So you try not to complain and try not to make a big scene. And generally expect your intonation will not be perfect, but you have to adjust very quickly. And if the action is very high, I'll sound like I'm from the 1930s.
Uh-huh.
And if the action's very low, I may get blisters and sound very, very modern. So it just is what it is.
Well, Brandi, this has been very fun. Thank you so much for talking with us, and hopefully we can see you in Wilmington.
Oh, thank you, George. And I love your show, so thank you so much for including me.
Thanks for listening, everyone. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by the Brent R. Harris Charitable Trust, restorer of several modernist houses, including Richard Neutra's Kaufman Desert House in Palm Springs, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Palm Springs, Malibu, Los Angeles, and Toronto.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 25,000 significant modernist houses, and access 5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Bobby Morris. Got a guest to suggest for the show? Write her at bobby@usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another podcast and chill edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.